You're very welcome. Mick Rooney, investigative journalist, Radio Espial. This is Shattering the Vanishing Triangle illusion. This is part 2 of our series, and it deals with the suspects in the 6 cases. This is a follow-on to episode 51, where we dealt with misinformation, and you remember Breen presented that episode. Now, just very quickly, thank you to all the recent subscribers. I think we've had almost 200 subscribers in the last 10 days. The channel continues to grow. Just want to deal with one item. Kieran, as you know, Kieran McConnell from Irish Cold Cases and the website Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, was with us for the last, I think it's year and a half. Kieran has departed the channel to pursue a podcasting project, a very extensive project for him to take on, and ultimately doing both things here, his work with Radio Espial, and also developing his own work with Irish Cold Cases and Ireland's Vanishing Triangle. It just wasn't feasible. We wish Kieran well. I am hoping to have Kieran sometime in the next 6 months to come on maybe and do an episode on him, to talk a bit more of the work that he's been doing outside of Radio Espial. Goggin, as you know, has been with us for the last couple of episodes. He'll be with us today. Let's just get straight into it. In the first part of Missing and Murdered, we discussed the impact and damage that misinformation can bring to these cases and hinder investigations, quite often perpetrated by the media itself. Our mantra remains, when we look at these cases, be objective, do your own case homework, and always question the source and their motivations. The 6 cases, you probably heard an awful lot about them. I think there was a Sky documentary. You're familiar. If you are aware of the work we do on Radio Espial, you'll be very familiar with these 6 cases. We're going to take you through this evening these 6 cases, and we're going to specifically focus on the suspects in these cases. Now, let's move on. Breen will be joining us after our intro summary. For the past 3 decades, through news media articles in print, TV and radio shows, podcasts, documentaries and dramas, we have been sold on an unproven illusion that one or more serial killers were rampant in Ireland during the late 1980s and 1990s, and one devious suspect was responsible for multiple such cases of missing persons cases and the deposition of bodies found in the vicinity of Dublin and the Wicklow Mountains, and the man who may have been responsible for many of those cases supposedly was Larry Murphy. In this episode, it's time we address the core media myth of Ireland's Vanishing Triangle and its real origins. Here's your first clue. No Irish police investigation ever mentioned the phrase Vanishing Triangle. Operation Trace was not set up with the specific intention of finding Ireland's serial killer. As I've said in episode 51 of Radio Espial, Missing and Murdered, Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, Misinformation, Breen Goggin explored the origins of media misinformation across a number of cases. Now, in our episode background, in September 1998, less than 2 months after the disappearance of Deirdre Jacob, Garda Commissioner Pat Byrne announced the establishment of Operation Trace. With a growing list of 11 women who disappeared under suspicious circumstances over 11 years, that was from 87 to 98, growing pressure from the media and public, notwithstanding resolutions and answers for the families of these women, Operation Trace initially brought together 6 of the Garda Force's most senior detectives under the direction and leadership of Assistant Garda Commissioner Tony Hickey. Their primary task was to trace, review, collate evidence in 6 specific cases: Annie McCarrick, Jojo Dullard, Fiona PENDER, Ciara Breen, Fiona Sinnott and DEIRDRE Jacob. Hence the name Operation Trace, T-R-A-C-E, Trace, Review, Collate Evidence, which would harness far newer computer system databases on criminals, sex offenders and subjects known and identified. At the time, Superintendent Jerry O'Connell, who'd been a senior detective on the Antoinette Smith case, would work under the Assistant Commissioner Tony Hickey on the day-to-day operations of the new task force based out of Naas, County Kildare in the Eastern Irish region. O'Connell, in turn, would have a team of 5 other officers, detectives. They were Mark Kerrigan, ex-murder squad Carlow; Maura Walsh, National Bureau of Criminal Investigation Dublin, that's known as the NCBI; Pat Tracy, who was a detective with also the murder squad, and he also worked on the Philip Carnes and Patricia Doherty cases; Marianne Cusack, National Drugs Unit; and Alan Bailey, Detective Murder Squad Dublin, who specialised in preparing books of evidence in many high-profile murders in the state. Now, what was Operation Trace's remit? Straightforwardly, it was to solve the 6 cases if possible, develop a better database for detectives and investigators, identify suspects and any case links across the many investigations, and yes, also to explore the potential: was there an active serial killer over a number of years, 87 to 98. Now, in the first month of Operation Trace, the team travelled to the UK, Europe and North America and established a greater understanding of how database systems like Holmes, HOLMES and VICAS, VICLAS, were being used abroad, and how to link their own new database system to those and also develop it. Now, while the Operation Trace team did interview the original detectives on the 6 cases, it was important that the new team that I listed above operated under review, without bias, fresh eyes and minds, and it was not hampered by any previous conceived hypotheses and working theories that may not have led to lines of inquiry or even suspects. This had to be a clean and balanced review of all 6 cases. Within months, the team had established their OVID database of more than 7,500 people. Somewhere in there were the likely names of the suspects and perpetrators in the 6 missing and murdered cases. And if there was a serial killer in Ireland, they would unearth the suspect and evidence for it. 2 names kept reappearing in case searches and investigations. Robert Howard, very much a serial killer in the UK and Ireland, and a casual travelling carpenter from the Bolton class area called Larry Murphy, with convictions for attempted murder, kidnap and rape. The focus of this episode is not an exploration of the crimes of Howard or Murphy, rather our 6 Operation Trace cases and the actual suspects under examination, then and now right up to date. Now, initially, after 2 years of extensive work, and despite continued media and public speculation, internally the Operation Trace team concluded that they could only find 2 cases of the original 6 examined that might share a suspect, and that the other 4 cases had very defined and identified suspects. Critically, it could only find circumstantial evidence linking one Larry Murphy to 2 cases, that of Deirdre Jacob and maybe Annie McCarrick. Now, post and later 2010, as the original work of Operation Trace had now morphed later into specialist internal and external investigation and independent teams with even better forensic resources, it's now believed the Deirdre Jacob case is the only one of the original 6 Murphy can be circumstantially linked to. However, by 2000, the core work of Operation Trace had led to a wider investigation into at least an additional 6 cases, some of which are known to be connected, potentially by suspect. These are the cases of Imelda Keenan, Marie-Cole Martin, Antoinette Smith and Patricia Doherty. These cases will be part of our part 3 in this series, Missing and Murdered. We've entitled that The Forgotten Cases. We're hoping to get that to you, if not next week, the following week, but hopefully next week, and Breen will be presenting that episode. Now, for this episode, we're going to look at the real suspects you may not be aware of in the original 6 cases of the so-called Vanishing Triangle. Let's go to Breen Goggin now. Okay, Breen Goggin, you're welcome back with us again.
Thanks, Mick.
Episode 52. Breen, you've played a big role in this episode, as you did in the previous episode 51. We looked at the misinformation. We've talked obviously about the summary of this case, these 6 cases, and we're going to get into the weeds about those cases now and the suspects. But before that, I just went through with our audience about Operation Trace. General thoughts?
Yeah, very thorough intro there, Mick. And I think some of the outputs from that were borne out there already. You know, as regards some of the misinformation there. I think there was no findings in that with the initial 6 cases that we're going to discuss today to suggest any serial killer or anything. And in fact, in the three of the cases in particular, there was firm suspects came out in that. So I think that's all been borne out. So I think supportive of what we're going to discuss next. So good intro there, make plenty of detail in there now, showing what the operation was about.
Yeah. Okay. I think let's get into it. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
All 6 cases. Here you go. 6 cases and suspects. Let me just pause for a moment because I need to move back to our timeline. So back to our timeline. Now, the 6 cases. We're going to start with the Annie McCarrick case. So again, a summary. Now, just to be clear, some of these cases, there's a little bit larger a summary, and it's based on the information we know. Some of this information is taken from the original timelines that we did on these cases. We've covered all of these 6 cases in timelines. Description, link to full timeline if you want to know more about the individual cases. But we're not going through every aspect of the cases. Each case comes with a summary, and we get to the why that investigation ended up with a suspect and who they were, if we can name them. Annie McCarrick. Annie Bridget McCarrick, born 21st of March 1967, an American woman from Long Island, New York, went missing under suspicious circumstances in 1993 while she was residing in Ireland. McCarrick was born on Long Island, New York, and grew up and lived in Bayport until her move to Ireland for the first time in January 1987. Aged 19, to study at St Patrick's College for teacher training in Drumcondra. She later switched colleges and instead decided to study Irish literature at Maynooth University for 3 years. For 2 years she was in a relationship with Dermot Ryan, a period when Annie rented and shared a small cottage with a female friend in Ballybowden, Dublin. In 1990 she returned to New York after a 4-month period. The relationship with Ryan petered out. He returned to Ireland and later decided to move to Italy. Annie instead remained in New York and spent 2 years in the US studying for a master's degree. Previously, she had also been in a short relationship with Philip Brady, brother of our longtime friend Hilary Brady. She knew the Brady family in Clondalkin back since her arrival in 87-88 and stayed with them for a period of time. But she still yearned for a new fresh start in Ireland in 1993. Almost all the family, friends, teachers and people who knew Annie saw her as an outgoing and well-adjusted person, trusting of others, if a little too idealistic at times. But it is important to state that Annie McCarrick was not the doughy-eyed young woman often presented in documentaries and books on this case. While idealistic, she retained her blue-collar upbringing and street smarts. Annie McCarrick disappeared on Friday, March 26, 1993. Her mother Nancy had already planned to visit her late the following week, arriving Friday, April the 3rd, having just missed her daughter's birthday a week before. Annie by then had started renting and living in an apartment in Sandymount and shared it with 2 of her female friends, Jill Tommy and Ada Walsh, after responding to a newspaper advert to flatmates to share. Again, we're not getting into the weeds of this case. Timeline, click it, and believe me, you'll get more than an hour and a half of this case if you want to get into it. Now, case suspects. Shortly before we recorded this program, I sought legal advice, and as has been the case for the past 6 months, we have been strongly warned not to name the 2 suspects in this case, and we have to respect that for legal reasons and also for the current ongoing Garda investigation. There was a reason in March 2023 that Garda in Ireland announced Annie's case had been upgraded to murder. What wasn't widely known at the time was that recent case reviews carried out from 2021 through to 2023 had uncovered significant failures in the original 1990s investigations, and the pressure to solve such a high-profile case, questionable witness statements and circumstantial evidence had originally diverted the case and its resources to the detriment of other lines of inquiry which should have been followed up more closely at the time. In short, there were stronger lines of investigation which should have led Gardaí to examine the possibility that Annie McCarrick's demise lay far closer to her Sandymount home and persons known to her at the time of her disappearance and events and interactions she had in the weeks and days prior to it. Currently, the active investigation team is scrutinising alibis provided by 2 brothers originally from the Clondalkin area who both had on and off romantic relationships with Annie over a number of years since she arrived in Ireland, and that the movements of both brothers on or about the time of Annie's disappearance are based on false alibis provided by friends and relatives knowingly or unknowingly covering for them. The advice from the DPP is that if those alibis are cracked and witnesses are prepared to come forward and state that the alibis were actively cajoled and sought by both brothers, then the state may then have a case to charge and prove in court. But until then, the DPP is not prepared to consider any submitted file. As I've said, for legal reasons, we have once again been advised not to name the two brothers, but anyone who has followed our case timeline can pretty much figure out the two people we're referring to. We are at the point, like the Gardaí, where it is impossible to ignore the elephant in the room within this case. Brian, you weren't on board originally when we covered this case, but it's certainly, without a shadow of a doubt, over the last 30 years has been the most high profile case in this state and possibly, you know, internationally as well.
Yeah, definitely, Mick. And I think, yeah, there was several things. I mean, the way it's going on, the fact that this was early on in the investigation as well, that like, I mean, it was a million miles away from Johnny Fox's, you know? And
yeah.
I think there was several different tangents of investigation there. So hopefully this, you know, this line now, they can get well in on this line now, and somebody will do the right thing and help crack the case, you know. Yeah,
and in previously in the timeline, you know, there were things we discussed. We discussed the, I think it was it Inishtown Garda station, a handbag, a so-called handbag that had identification from Annie handed in, that appears like some other cases and evidence that has disappeared into the ether and can no longer be located. But I think it's safe to say in this case, suspect-wise, we have come a long way than we were in the 1990s, and Johnny Foxes and bouncers and barmen talking about Annie there and the IRA and all this sort of nonsense, and a whole setup that was based there, and people in restaurants saw, and people on buses saw. That whole and those many tangents and lines of inquiry have pretty much gone out the door, and we are back in Sandymount.
Yeah, and apart from, I think the lady in Ranelagh was the one credible one, I think, when she said she started getting on the bus, but then, like, you know, it's a hell of a long way all the way out to Enniskerry. Like, there was, so that she got off at Milltown or something.
Yeah, I think we've said that. Yeah. Nobody is arguing that she may not at around, I think it was around 2:30 to 3 p.m, 3:30. No one is arguing that she may have got on the bus and was seen by people.
Yeah. It's just where she went.
The argument is, how far did she go, and who she was meeting, and what purpose was she meeting? But yeah, I think it's now reasonable that the Gardaí investigation no longer believes she ever went anywhere near Enniskerry and got to Johnny Fox's later that evening.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the other things there as well, like, I think her personality, that was, I think people really shortchanged her. Some of the writing that was done, like that, you know, she was easily impressionable. That's rubbish. She came over, she was independent, she came from a blue collar background, so she had street smarts there. She came over, she on her own, she lived here for a couple of years, went back to America, came back again, and like, she very much assimilated into Irish life. So she was well on the way to being naturalised Irish, if not there already, because you know, she mixed in with Irish people, lived with Irish girls, socialised and so on. So I think she was a lot more clued in and very independent, and I think that wasn't, people did her wrong by making out that she could be easily led with things.
Yeah. I think there was a perception that she was romantic about Ireland, but how many Americans do you meet just casually as tourists on a holiday that are romantic about Ireland? And yes, she had all that, but it's forgotten that she had well assimilated herself into Irish life, Irish education, the Irish workplaces, had many Irish friends. She was well assimilated and was very much dedicated to remaining full-time in Ireland, much to the chagrin of her parents, who were probably more nervous than she was. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There is a perception that she was this, deer caught in the headlights and, silly, foolish girl, which is completely wrong. She was very much an astute, smart, intelligent lady. And that's all we can say about that. And it's the perception of her is not entirely accurate in an awful lot of the documentaries and recreations of her case.
Correct. And I think the other thing, just back to your point as well, Mick, about, you said, this case is a lot closer to Sandymount. I think the fact that, what went down in the flat before she left and so on, that would suggest that she wasn't going to stray too far from Sandymount, and that whatever she was going to do or wherever she was going to go, she wasn't going to be gone for that long either, and whatever conversation she was going to have was going to be a short one, considering she just put the stuff inside the door, took off, and
exactly, yeah. And I think we
going to be an elaborate thing, and asking the friends or inviting the friends as well, whatever conversation she was going to have with whoever she was going to meet. So when she was going to meet somebody, you would expect she might have wanted the friend for a bit of moral support or a bit of safety in numbers as well. So either way, it wasn't going to be a long trip or anything like that,
Yeah.
So again, that's close to Sandymount again, like you said.
Yeah. And again, all we know about that case in regards to the critical points were, as you said, and just to be clear, and we went through this in our original timeline, check it out in the description. You've heard about Annie bringing back shopping. I think it was Quinsworth, was it? We saw the receipt, the detailed receipt. It's in the timeline. She left those, as we call them in Ireland, messages. The shopping, a small bag of shopping. I think she was planning to bake cakes for her visitors the following day, who were coming over. She left that. To be clear, she left that shopping directly inside the door. She didn't leave it on the kitchen table, as was misreported in other recreations and reports of this case, and that would suggest that she was somehow in a hurry. She'd been communicating with a number of friends and people that morning from a call box, because she couldn't phone from her apartment. It didn't have the facilities. The landlord didn't have facilities for outgoing calls, only incoming calls. So when she made a call, she would have to go out to the call box, which we know was tracked, and some of the communications off it as regards who was phoned and who wasn't phoned. So just to be clear on that, it looks like she went in briefly back home, and for whatever reason she left things unattended. She left washing in the machine downstairs. She left her shopping in the door. So it looked like she was briefly heading out, maybe to see someone, meet someone, but was not planning to be away very long.
Yeah, correct. And the other bit as well, Mick, the other bit that was falsely reported as well was the footage in the bank. That was from a few days earlier than what was reported as well. She wasn't caught on CCTV there either that day.
Yeah, I mean, that possibly was a Garda Foxpaw, whatever you want to call it. That was probably, considering the profile of this case, that was one of the fucking most atrocious and appalling cock-ups by Gardaí over the years of that case. That was prolificated and distributed by Gardaí over years and years and years, until, and I think we actually communicated with Gardaí and the Garda press office and brought this to notice of them last year, and only suddenly then everybody else scampered off and went, oh yeah, the date is wrong, isn't it? Yeah, it's 10 days earlier. What the hell were they thinking? Why didn't somebody cop that? You know, it wasn't a mistake. The CCTV was clearly coded with the correct date, and they were essentially using a date to prove somebody was in a bank on a date which they couldn't be certain she was. I've said enough on it previously. I don't know what more to say on it. It was an atrocious cock-up, but it pretty much summed up the early investigation and the people who worked on that case.
Yeah.
Brian, let's move on to our next case, because we could be here all evening talking about the Annie McCarrick case. Okay.
I just want to move on anyway.
Yeah.
Something will give here anyhow, and they get a result for her mother.
Hopefully, I hope so. Jojo Dullard. Josephine Jojo Dullard, aged 21, of Callan, County Kilkenny, was living in Harold's Cross, County Dublin, when she went missing on the 9th of November 1995. She had recently finished a beauty therapy course after finding it very difficult to juggle work and college. On the day she disappeared, she was planning on moving from Dublin back home to Callan for good. She had missed her last bus to Callan and had to take another bus to Naas, County Kildare. She was last known to be in the Moon area of County Kildare while hitchhiking home to Kilkenny. She had been driven from the Naas area to Kilcullen, County Kildare, and then on to Kilcullen to Moon. She was last seen using a payphone in Moon village, and through telephone records, Gardaí found out the call was made at 11:37 p.m. to Dullard's friend Mary Cullinan. She ended the call as she was about to enter another car. There was also an unconfirmed sighting of her walking along the road in Castledermot, County Kildare. The driver of that car had other occupants in it, and they have never been identified. The case suspects in that investigation. We are aware from Gardaí for many years that a Moon local in the Kildare area has been long a suspect in that case and was in the area and the village at the time. Gardaí have long had their primary suspect in Jojo's case, a young male driver of a car with other occupants on the night in question, and an overt profile and criminal history of opportunism late at night and accosting young women using his vehicle, then living in the Moon area just outside the village. However, without the discovery and examination of Jojo's body and forensic proof, it is highly unlikely he will ever be prosecuted. This man's identity, though suspected and tipped to Gardaí by many locals and victims years ago, has never been publicly or privately shared. Brian, thoughts on that case?
Yeah. Again, there's another one you see as well with those guys who gave her the lift as well. You know, it's just in all the cases that somebody's thinking back in hindsight. You know, if I could have done something different, I'd say you see it in all those cases.
Yeah, shoulda, coulda, woulda. You know.
Yeah, I know. Tis that, but you know, that looks like a strong line of inquiry there anyway, and it's been, as you said, it's been there for years. It's thought the guy was, you know, connected a bit politically as well, but again, it's just evidence. Hopefully they get something to push it on, but I suppose they shouldn't restrict themselves to that either, and see if anything else comes up, and people shouldn't be, if they think they know something, they should still come forward with it, you know. Yeah,
it's a long time, you know, and yeah. This is it's one of the most common lines when appeals are made by the Gardaí. Look, whatever information you have, whatever personal connection you had to a case, time has moved on. You were probably young then, maybe you're a parent now, maybe you're a grandparent now. Time has moved on, and there is a victim, and there is a family connected to that victim, And if you have information, please, it's time to come forward. Enough is enough. Enough time has gone on. If you've got information that is relevant, please come forward and give that information to the Gardaí. If you want to give us a tip off and we can somehow liaise between you and the Gardaí, we'll do our best to do that. But ultimately, there's a responsibility on anybody with information to come forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's only, if they don't, like, it's just pure luck if it will ever get solved, that somebody might stumble on a remains or
and then you're into a whole different area. If remains of a young lady is found, then it's who they are. They've got to go back to the database, check the database. That can take months, and sometimes it can take years. And then suddenly, you know, time has gone on, and then worse, and as we've seen in so many of these cases, witnesses have passed away. Sadly, family members of victims have passed away with never any resolution. They go to their own graves never knowing, you know, and that's got to be the worst thing, going to your own grave and realising I will never know where my son or daughter or what happened to them, you know, is, and that's so incredibly painful for relatives.
Yeah, and with the investigation, it just shows how far behind they are, because, like, if there's a known murder, they've got the murder scene. With a missing person that's presumed murdered, they don't even have the murder scene. That's how you know, difficult it is and how far behind they are with it. Like, so, you know, again, hopefully this something we'll give in this case as well, Mick.
Okay, Fiona Pender. Fiona Pender was last seen around 6 a.m. at a ground floor flat on Church Street, Tullamore, County Offaly, Ireland, on the morning of Thursday, August the 23rd, 1996. She shared the flat with her boyfriend, John Thompson. Following a several-month spell living in London from November 1995, the couple had returned back to County Offaly, Ireland in the spring. Fiona left school at 15 years of age after her intermediate certificate. A hairdresser by trade and occasional part-time model, Fiona was bright, outgoing and a positive young lady who always wore a smile on her face. She had trained with Cassard's Saloon and also taken up some modelling work with a friend's agency, Emer Condren. At the time of her disappearance, Fiona was 7 months pregnant and had spent the previous day out shopping with her mother. She was reported last seen by her boyfriend at the couple's flat before he left for work. Fiona vanished without trace, and for over 27 years, 28 now I think now since we did the timeline, has never been located. Following cold case reviews, her disappearance is now classified as a murder with a suspect. Who is that suspect? We can name that suspect. We've known for a long time who the suspect is. It's John Thompson, her boyfriend. Gardaí have never wavered from their belief that Fiona's boyfriend John Thompson murdered Fiona Pender with the assistance of family members and deposited her body on forest farmland. Thompson fled to the UK and later, ultimately, to Canada. Thompson, following difficulties with the failure of inheritance cases from the family farm and transport company and an inheritance from his uncle, emigrated abroad with his new partner after Fiona's disappearance. In August, do you want to? Yeah, okay.
Add to that, that was 2012. He immigrated to Canada, and I think there was a piece in the Sunday World in 2006 by Cathal O'Shea, Nicola Tallant, and just on the as regards the inheritance and so on. It's sort of what's not said rather than what's said in that.
As so often, yeah.
Yeah, they interview his sister, who's since passed on, Tanya, and she, you know, said that she didn't see much of him. He's not around the farm. Don't know if he's got married or not. He's we think he might be building a house there. So clearly they weren't on. Sounds like they weren't on speaking terms. Maybe they were, maybe nodding acquaintances or whatever. But then that's so you can. There's a lot there you can read between the lines on that. But I think, like, Thompson took exception to being questioned about this. When,
Yeah, he did.
you know,
He was very vocal about it as well initially in the media. Yeah.
And the other thing that the sister in that interview said about, I don't see what benefit. There was a documentary upcoming on Fiona Pender's disappearance, and she said, "Oh, the whole tragedy caused far too much upset already, not only for Fiona's family but also for my own. I don't see what benefit there is in dragging it all up again." No, that's, you know, not very. That's not very empathetic towards your future sister-in-law.
Nope.
You know, and I think there's a lot. You can read a lot between the lines there as well. But I think Thompson took exception to that, given which, you know, if in any situation like this, the first person they're going to look to is the other half, like. So that's just the way it is with investigations, and he took a lot of exception to that, like, you know. So anyway, he emigrated anyway, and then there was further carry on the Canadian side. Then Mick, you were going to get into that.
Yeah, and remind me, I have a question for you, because I know this is a case that you took a very particular interest in over the last year or two, but anyway, I digress slightly. We'll come back to that. Remind me, I'll come back to that. So August 2014, Gardaí in Ireland become aware of an ongoing case in Saskatchewan, Canada. It concerns an Irishman from the Midlands of Ireland, Laois, accused of sexually assaulting his wife and threatening to kill her. They soon establish it is indeed their prime suspect into the abduction and murder of Fiona Pender. He had previously been arrested and questioned with other relatives without charge a number of years before. That was 1997. When Gardaí travelled to Canada, the woman revealed that her husband, a truck driver and biker, had revealed to her that he was responsible for a missing woman in Ireland, and that if she, the wife, ever spoke about it to anyone, she would end up like her. She discloses more information about the prime suspect. She reveals that during the early years of their relationship, 2004, the year they were married, he brought her to the Sleep Bloom Mountains in Ireland and chillingly indicated to her that he had buried a missing woman in a woodland area in Cappard near Rosenallis, County Laois. The area will be searched by specialist Gardaí teams, but no evidence of a body or grave was discovered. But Brian, before I forget, I'm going to read a brief bit about extradition. But before I digress, because I know people are going to say, "Well, if he's in Canada, why can't they get him back to face?" You know, and I'm going to go into that shortly. But I remember I was privately talking about this case about 2 months ago. Talk to me about the vehicle.
Yeah. So the vehicle, if you read some of the various accounts, you can kind of piece it together. But there was a vehicle being driven at speed around that area in Laois, near Laois Offaly border there, with the banner "Keeper Lit" on it, and this was a 1986 Daihatsu Jeep, blue-coloured Daihatsu Jeep, and that piece I mentioned earlier on the Sunday World. There's a photograph of a certain farmer from Laois there leaning against his Jeep.
No, we've seen, well, we've seen it. We know that vehicle was driven by John Thompson. We know that was his vehicle at one stage, and it was passed on. Yeah,
so that vehicle, it was still registered up till recently, and still.
Yeah, that was one of the amazing points. I thought, Brian, are you sure about this? And you checked it out and says, yeah. I know it's. I think, what was it registered at 86 and 86?
86 and 86K, so it would have been an import there.
Yeah.
And 86K 385. Now that is still. It was still registered a couple of years ago. I haven't checked it since now, but it's still around. So like, I can't. I don't know what investigations were done, but you know, you'd expect that should have been, considering there was 2 sightings both around Tullamore and out in the country, that should have been taken apart at the seams, like.
Absolutely, yeah. Literally stripped apart for evidence.
Yeah, so that was peculiar there. And then just moving over to the other side of the pond, Mick, this it's all out there already, but that case with the sexual assault and so on is bizarre stuff.
It's bonkers.
It's like something out of a horror film. It's like something out of, I don't know. It's like something out of a horror film, and there was no jury. It was just a judge.
Mm-hmm.
I presume because of the sensitivity of it, but he was acquitted anyway. But like what puzzled me was, like, why would a woman put herself through all of that? Because some of this was filmed as well. There was film evidence of the assaults, and why would a woman put herself
he filmed it.
He did. He filmed
like
it.
Not to get into gory detail, but he literally filmed the assault.
Yeah, and it was it's bizarre stuff. It's all there to be, if you can look it up and read about it. But it is it's bizarre stuff, and why would a woman put herself through all that humiliation and everything? To be a very, very elaborate, off the wall plan on her part if she was going to do that. But he was acquitted, so that's it. But so that's what went on in Saskatchewan afterwards. Just on the extradition, somebody close to him did report that he was in Ireland in late 2013. I haven't seen verification of that, but it was somebody close to him said that. But since things heated up after that in 2014,
I believe one of the visits was to do with the passing of his mother. Okay, that's understandable. He came home for that, and he went back to Canada. But there is a belief that he has been back since, but not in recent years. The most recent years. And when I say most recent years, I'm talking about the last 10 years, more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so just quickly on that extradition, because everybody will ask, well, okay, how does that process work? So look, I'm not going to indulge too much. I'm going to read this fairly quickly. Extradition from Canada and requests for extradition. To the best of my understanding of this case, Gardaí and the Irish state have never forwarded an extradition request to Canada for John Thompson. Canada is able to extradite persons to stand trial for imposition of a sentence or to serve a sentence at the request of a foreign state or entity that is an extradition partner under Canada's Extradition Act. A person may be extradited from Canada only if the alleged crime and conduct in question, and for which the extradition is requested, is recognised as criminal by both countries. As communications between states are privileged, all information related to specific cases is confidential and cannot be released publicly until an arrest is made under an extradition warrant. Following this step, public information may be released on a case-by-case basis. However, even when a case is pending in the courts, the information may continue to be confidential if the court issues a publication ban. The foreign country may seek the extradition of a person in two ways: by providing Canada with a formal extradition request and supporting documentation, or by requesting the person's provisional arrest, which must then be followed by a formal extradition request. Neither has happened in this case. I cannot answer why an extradition warrant was not issued for Thompson, but I am aware from Gardaí investigation sources that should John Thompson ever set foot in Ireland again, they will arrest and charge him with murder. And that's my final thought on this. Brian?
Yeah. Likewise, Mick. That's it really. So hopefully there'll be further development in the case, because it's just been at that stall now for several years. Yeah, and to be honest, whether he comes back to Ireland or doesn't come back to Ireland, I don't think it's going to change anything. The evidence is what the evidence is. You either act on it or you don't act on it, or else the case just sits in limbo and nothing is going to happen on it. I don't see anything dramatically changing in the case unless Gardaí act, talk to the DPP and decide, no,
we've got enough now, we're going to act now and put a formal request for extradition in. I don't know even where Thompson currently is. Last I heard, he was doing crazy living in forests and log cabins, hiding away, and is very much a recluse. Okay, on to our next case. Ciara Breen. Ciara Breen, aged 17, from Dundalk, County Louth, Ireland, went missing on the 13th of February 1997 on Bachelor's Walk, where she lived with her mother in a small terraced house. She was last seen by her mother, Bernadette, who said at the time they had gone to bed just after midnight. That day, they had gone to a local cafe for evening dinner and then returned home. According to Bernadette, she was due to get the results of a biopsy the following morning from Blackrock Clinic, and Ciara was understandably concerned about this. The two had a short conversation on Bernadette's bed before going to sleep just after midnight. After 2 a.m, Bernadette got up to go to the bathroom and discovered Ciara was not in her room, nor her own bedroom. It was not the first time Ciara had snuck out during the night. She had left a window on the latch on the bottom story of the house, and it is believed she did so that she could climb back in later. It is considered the most likely scenario in Ciara's case that she decided to leave her home to attend pre-planned meeting with someone that night. This was later verified by close friends of Ciara when interviewed by Gardaí. In 2014, 2 credible witnesses came forward with sightings of Ciara from the night she disappeared, and the following year, in 2015, a man was arrested but released without charge. The male suspect was arrested again in 2017 for an unrelated drink driving charge. However, he died of a drug overdose while in custody. Ciara Breen was a normal 17-year-old finding her way in life in the satellite town of Dundalk, some 50 miles north of Dublin, in the border county of Louth. Ciara was born in March 1979 to her mother Bernadette and father. At a very early age, her parents separated and her father moved to the United States in the 80s. Her mother Bernadette raised Ciara alone, returning to her own parents' home for some years before settling in Bachelor's Walk, Dundalk, in a small 2-storey house just around the corner from her parents' home on St Mary's Road. Ciara grew up in Dundalk with her mother, schooled there, and had little or no contact with her natural father from there on. She was quiet, self-conscious as a child, experienced a degree of school bullying, and by her mid-teenage years became very body-conscious. She left school early at the age of 16 in her 5th year, and she and Bernadette embarked on a holiday trip to Disneyland in the US. It seemed to settle Ciara, and she began to make friends on her return to Dundalk. Her social circle was expanding. In early 1997, Bernadette organised a dental appointment for Ciara to address her concerns about her frontal teeth and self-confidence. She was becoming a young lady and had already decided she wanted to pursue a career in makeup and beauty. While doing so on her computer course, this is what Ciara decided she wanted to do. Approaching her 18th birthday, that March 97, her mother was already planning a surprise visit back to the US to Disneyland for Ciara. In the early morning of the 13th of February 1997, Ciara once again snuck out of the house to meet someone and has never been seen again. Within days, Gardaí knew Ciara was meeting that night. Brian, do you just want to... Again, this is one of those cases where, before we get into the suspect, because I think it's pertinent, it's one of those cases. Now, I'm not saying we talked a little bit about Annie and, the media perception of him at times, and we've seen it in other cases, but certainly this definitely was a case where a young lady making her way in the world, Bernadette doing the best job she could to bring up her daughter. Definitely Ciara was what we would identify as quite a vulnerable young lady.
Yeah, she was only 17, coming up to 18.
Yeah.
And as I said there, she had a bit of trouble at school. Kids can be very cruel, obviously, and it's kind of, she had a degree of school bullying and so on, but she I think she obviously had a bit of hassle with that and so on, which, you know, was made her a prime target for somebody else to move in on her there. Well, like I said, only 17, coming up to 18, you know, so very, very young, like, and yeah, very tragic, you know, and I'm sure she didn't know what she was up against when she snuck out that night, you know.
Yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned as well, her grandparents, she was close to her grandparents there as well.
Yeah, incredibly close.
Nice family. They had that documentary on there on TG Cahir recently as well, and it was good to see, you know, some of the other family, her uncle now, and her uncle and his daughter as well, because she was to be godmother to her as well, but unfortunately she went missing just before she was born and was to be christened, you know. So there was a huge impact and tragedy all around in the family, for everybody in the family there, like, you know. And yeah, go ahead, Mick.
Yeah, and we'll see a little bit of that as well, in a sense of, you know, and I see this an awful lot with not just city people, as it were, in Ireland, but I see this particularly with rural people who live in rural areas, that there's a very particular connection to grandparents, to parents, to children, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the Deirdre Jacob case coming up. But in regards to the suspect in this case, so as I said, we have a young, vulnerable young lady just after leaving school. The case suspect was Liam Mullen. Now, just to be very clear, Liam Mullen is now deceased. Okay, suspect, so that complicates the case. Much like the Fiona PENDER case, Gardaí also never wavered from their conclusion that Liam Mullen murdered her, Ciara. Mullen, arrested several times, came within hours of a charge and prosecution. In July 2017, then 55-year-old Mullen was detained and arrested for drunk driving in Dundalk at 8:30 p.m. on an evening in July. He was also carrying drugs in his vehicle. His autopsy would later reveal a substantive amount of drugs in his body taken around the time or shortly before his arrest. Mullen died a short time after in police custody of the overdose, lightly fearing that his arrest was rightly a final ruse by Gardaí, who had him under surveillance for years. With Mullen dead, we are left with only one question: was Mullen responsible for other such crimes at this time? Brian?
Yeah, I think so that's a bit of a rhetorical one, Mick, because, you know, guys like him, sure that wasn't his debut at that either, like, you know, and considering just the age group, he was 55 when he died, which meant he would have been 34, 35 at the time Ciara went missing, and he'd been, you know, around with her before that, so he was basically double her age, you know, and that's one thing to note there as well. And, you know, like a difference of 17 years, you know, if you're 60 and the person who's seeing is 77, then that's not a big difference. But whereas, like, if you have a teenager seeing a middle-aged guy, that is a 17 years is a massive amount of time there. It's the same age as what she was, like, you know. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as well, you know, we're looking at 6 cases here. This is certainly one of the cases that I look at, and I look at the suspect and I go, and you're going to be, we'll talk about this more later when we lead into episode 3, the forgotten cases. This, I know, is a case that you'll have in the back of your mind, and a suspect, and you'll be looking at other cases in a wider field, and you'll be thinking exactly as I'm thinking: was Mullen responsible for other crimes? Yeah,
because he's that classic case that, you know, he could be. Whereas we know with the other cases, more commonly they were linked, you know, boyfriend, husband, that kind of thing. Whereas this guy was a predator.
Yeah, big time. And the other thing, just to strengthen what as I said, he was the only suspect in this case.
Yeah,
that's it. Like,
yeah, that's it. Slam dunk. There was never any other suspect in this case.
Yeah. And just to call out to strengthen that, there was at least 2 or 3 files as evidence was accumulated over the years. There was at least I think 2 or 3 files, possibly more, sent to the DPP as they picked up more on this as well. You know, and I think he was, well, obviously he passed away, but the I think finding her remains was tricky. That what they thought was the burial site had no, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but there was a lot of rubble dumped in over the years as well, which would have potentially destroyed any remains if they were to recover them. So they tried searching that site, but turned nothing up, like, you know. So it was very, very tough case all over, and it was DI Pat Murray was involved in that as well. You know, very dedicated detective there, Mick.
Yeah, no, you know, our thoughts obviously. I always think of Bernadette when I think of Ciara.
Yeah. And
she went to our grave.
Yeah.
I wouldn't quite say not knowing quite what happened to her daughter. She knew. She warned Mullen off her daughter. Get the hell away from my daughter. What are you up to? What are you at? You know, leave her alone. You know. So in a sense that she went to her grave, but she knew who was responsible for her daughter's death. And it was a case of, will you please just tell us where she is? Whatever happened to you, I couldn't care less. I just want to bring Ciara home. And that was the tragedy of Bernadette passing away without that. And that's, for the most part, I will always go back to that with cases like this. Whatever you might think, the family of victims, they're not out for revenge. They want resolution. They want to bury their loved one, find them and bury them if they're missing and haven't been found. If the reasons and motive and justice come with that, okay, that's fine. That's an add-on and that's a bonus. But just tell us or tip us off anonymously where a loved one is, so we can get on with that process of life and moving on.
Yeah. And like, there's people who know more than you'd hope. Like in this instance now, if any cronies she had, if they were 17 now, they'd be, you know, 40, 45 or something now. Like, so sorry, if they were in their teens back then, 17, 18, then they'd be, you know, pushing up on 45 now. So, you know, you're in a totally different life stage. You know, you probably have kids the same age as what Ciara was when she was missing and so on. Or, you know, so people, surely some of the people around them should be in a position to come forward if they know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you're a suspect and you're dead, you don't have a conscience. But that suspect had friends, relatives, girlfriends, a wife. I don't know whether he had children, but they need to come forward and speak, because as we all know in these cases, a suspect never remains totally silent within his or her own confidence circle. They tell somebody eventually. And we're appealing for those people to come forward. Liam Mullen is gone now, but Ciara, Breen's family still remain, and they still want answers, and they still want to know where their daughter is and bring her home. On to our next case. Fiona Sinnott. At the time of her disappearance, Fiona Sinnott was living in the rural village of Ballyhit, Broadway, County Wexford, Ireland, some 120 kilometres south of Dublin City. Fiona was a young single mother, and her daughter Emma was 11 months old at the time of her mother's disappearance. 19-year-old Fiona Sinnott spent the night of Sunday, February the 8th, 1998, socialising with a group of friends in Butler's Pub in Broadway, County Wexford, not far from her rented home. Fiona's friends described Fiona as being happy that night and in good spirits. However, her friends would later tell Gardaí that Fiona was also complaining of pain in one of her arms. Fiona had been the victim of domestic violence in the past, and the report of pain in her arm raised the suspicion of Gardaí when later examining the case. Also in Butler's pub that Sunday night was Fiona's ex-boyfriend and the father of her child. He did not join Fiona and her friends and spent the night drinking at the bar alone. At roughly midnight, Fiona left Butler's pub with her ex-boyfriend and nobody else. Her ex-boyfriend would later tell Gardaí that he and Fiona walked a short distance to her home, where he, too, spent the night, but on Fiona's sofa while she slept upstairs in her bedroom. He would also tell Gardaí that on the following morning, Monday the 9th of February, Fiona was still complaining of a pain in her arm and wanted to visit a doctor, and that she would hitch a lift to the doctor's office. Fiona's ex-boyfriend then gave her £5, and he was picked up by his mother at 9:30 a.m. His mother drove him back home in nearby Codstown, where their child Emma had spent the previous night. Fiona never arrived at the doctor's office. No sighting of her hitchhiking have ever been reported, nor has anyone ever come forward to Gardaí stating that they gave Fiona a lift that morning. In the days after Fiona's disappearance, neighbours reported seeing numerous black bins outside of her home in Ballyhit. When the Gardaí searched Fiona's home and forensically examined it, they discovered no evidence of foul play. However, the investigators were struck by how clean the house was, considering the fact that a single mother lived there with her 11-month-old daughter. Fiona's landlord would later tell Gardaí that whenever he visited Fiona's home, there would be bits and pieces everywhere, as would be expected in any house with such a young baby. Fiona's family would also report the odd, clean and organised nature of her rented home after her disappearance. A few weeks after Fiona vanished, a local farmer approached Gardaí with information that was relevant to the case. The farmer told them that whilst attending to his cattle, he found numerous black bin bags on his property. He opened some of the bags and found some letters addressed to Fiona Sinnott. Unfortunately, when the farmer found this evidence, he was unaware of Fiona's disappearance at the time. He presumed it just to be another case of illegal dumping, which quite common at the time and still now is, and burned the black bags. Tragically, no trace of evidence relating to Fiona Sinnott has ever been found. Brian?
Yeah, so, very tough case. I mean, so many people affected, between her baby daughter at the time, who never knew her, the family as well. I mean, they were tight enough family there. The father died. They said he died of a broken heart at 59. They said he would stand over the gate, wondering would she come back. And
and how often have we heard that with relatives? Yeah. That it literally broke them.
Yeah, and you can see the mother when she was interviewed, like she was just so, it's like somebody just at that point years later had just completely knocked the window out of her sails, like she was like that. And the siblings, I thought, was very poignant. Was, well, two things really. I think there was five siblings. The oldest lady, Caroline, she died young at 47. Then there was two boys, Seamus and Norman, and she had rang from the pub to see would Seamus come down.
That's right, yeah. And Seamus said, "Oh, I'd love to, but I can't because I'm up early in the morning for work." Yeah, and
he's another guy you'd really feel for, because similar to what happened with John Pender, Annie McCarrick's friend, so on. Like, this is a real one where if only he knew, like, and that, so you can just see the effect that when he was interviewed, the effect that had on him as well. And she had another sister then who was very close in age to her, Diane, like, and a cousin called Gina, and they were all very, very tight from the sound of it. So it was very poignant when they became aware of the extent of the injuries that she suffered, and the hospital visits, and what happened to her before she went missing there. To the day when they got the full story on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we went over this in the timeline. I can't now recall directly back, but I have seen hospital records of the abuse, the litany of her in and out, in and out, in and out of hospital. And why, I suppose from the authorities aspect in the hospital, alarm bells were not already ringing about, you know, look, something is going on here, you know. She's covering for someone here. And this is what happens. This is a classic case of domestic abuse, and where if people around the person don't act, and in fairness, or maybe relatives are not quite aware of the level that's going on, this is ultimately where it can lead to, tragically.
And she was very young as well, Mick. Call out that, like, she was only a teenager there as well, you know. Very tough. And just on the family, there was 2 uncles as well, heavily involved in searching for her. And this family did, and they put up with intimidation and attacks as well in the aftermath as well. Like, but this family did, you know, did huge work, as all families do. But you know, organising their own digs and everything, you know, and some of it, I mean, horrific stuff. Even one of them there, they were going down into a septic tank and you know, just looking for remains and so on. So you know, this family did huge graft there, you know.
Yeah, and it's horrific thinking that every time a family engages actively in a search, you don't know what you're going to stumble upon and find. You know, exactly. It's appalling to think about that, and we've touched on this before. You know, we always say, when families are put in this situation, you can be lucky, and with a heavily resourced Garda investigation, you can get assigned your Garda liaison officer who tries to do their best to communicate with you what's going on. But even they're limited in the information that's passed to them from the investigation team that they can are allowed pass to the family. And it's just, there's no manual, there's no book that somebody can hand you and go, oh, your daughter is missing, or your son is missing, or your son was murdered, or your daughter was missing. Here's a book, read that, and it'll tell you exactly what to do. Every family of a missing or murdered person is plunged into that nightmare every day somewhere in this world, and unfortunately far too often.
This is it, yeah. I think there's another case, this one and previous two, where, you know, there's one known suspect, and it must be galling for them on top of all that then to be hearing stuff about the Vanishing Triangle and Larry Murphy and all this, when, you know, a total distraction, this misinformation from, you know, while they're trying to do their work and trying to keep the case alive and keep it in the public eye, and keep it so as people will, anybody might remember something, or, you know, come across something, you know, in the intervening years, like that, you know, some of this other side shows going on to take away from that, you know. Okay.
So the case suspect in Fiona Sinnott's case, Sean Carroll, here we are again, boyfriend, March 1998. Gardaí are certain of their line of inquiry and suspects. As Gardaí begin to gather information and conduct interviews, particularly after testing the account of ex-boyfriend Sean Carroll, a series of previous disturbing episodes of domestic and relationship abuses emerges concerning a former partner. Local medical and hospital records reveal a consistent pattern of injuries sustained by Fiona: severely twisted ankle, facial and body bruising, swellings, bites to the legs, and a damaged jawbone. Some hospital visits required brief hospitalisation, but on each occasion Fiona insisted on discharging herself and refusing stayovers. Despite hospital staff attempts, she was often circumspect and unwilling to reveal the proper nature of her injuries. And those sources came from Wexford General Hospital records. The investigation team began to review previous local Gardaí calls and visits. One such call stood out, and this was from a female Garda, Michelle Power, who had taken a call for assistance. In late 1996, two male uniformed Gardaí responded to this call from a witness who reported a distressed woman outside a house not far from Rosslare Harbour. The distressed woman was Fiona Sinnott. The eyewitness related that Fiona had fled from a house after a man had threatened her with a knife. The two Gardaí escorted Fiona back into the house where she had been staying that evening and found a man asleep and drunk on a sofa. She was allowed to gather her belongings and taken from the house for her own safety. No charges were ever filed following this incident because the young man on the sofa had no previous convictions, and Fiona insisted she was not willing to press charges.
Mick, sorry, just to call out there, that was late 1996, so she was only barely 18 at that time.
Yeah. And that's a big call for a young lady of her age to call out somebody in an abuse case. Yeah.
Oh, that stress you had a young lady like that, like.
Yeah. Further investigation revealed yet another serious assault on Fiona a year earlier to her disappearance. All of this evidence was only discovered in retrospect, and now, with Fiona disappeared, no charges could be brought against this man. Gardaí already had the results of a technical examination of Fiona's house. Like Fiona's family, they noticed that it had been stripped bare of a number of her personal belongings. It was spotlessly clean, which was considered to be unusual for Fiona. To all intents and purposes, Gardaí believed that during the subsequent days after Fiona's disappearance, persons known to her and with access to her house had cleared and removed all personal items connected to Fiona and her young child. This included personal items, clothing and toys. Together with a report of black bin bags discovered by a local farmer dumped on his property, and that he had noted letters of address correspondence had Georgia Street, Wexford written on them, which was where Fiona had previously rented an apartment with her ex-boyfriend, Sean Carroll. Increasingly, Garda began to suspect that somebody was trying to mislead them into thinking that the Fiona had simply run away and vacated her Ballyhit rented house. Unfortunately, the farmer had burnt the item, being completely unaware of the missing case of Fiona Sinnott, so it cannot be established if these were the same black bin bags outside Fiona's Ballyhit house in the days immediately after her disappearance. In 2001, a man suspected by Gardaí and previously interviewed under caution of having been involved in disposal of Fiona's body dies from a suspected drug overdose. The man in question had been finding it increasingly difficult to live with the guilt of being involved. However, he could not provide Garda Síochána with a formal anonymous tip-off because he believed only 3 people knew about the exact location of Fiona's whereabouts. Confiding in somebody close to him, he said it would be tantamount to signing his own death warrant, and he lived in fear of his life and the person directly connected to the murder itself. September the 16th, February 2005. Fiona is legally classified as dead, and on this date, September the 16th, Gardaí announced they are now treating the case of missing Fiona Sinnott as a murder investigation. On the same day as the announcement, 3 men and 3 women are arrested and questioned in New Ross and Enniscorthy Gardaí stations in relation to Fiona's murder. Some of them are related to Sean Carroll. Those arrests: Sean Carroll, the prime suspect; Kitty Carroll, the suspect's mother; the suspect's sister and her boyfriend; an ex-girlfriend of the suspect; and a male friend of the suspect. This includes the prime suspect in the murder of Fiona Sinnott. He is arrested shortly after 7 a.m. at his home and detained under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act. The primary charge against the 6 is withholding information. They are all released without charge.
Sorry, Mick, just to follow there as well. A file was sent to the DPP on that as well.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just there just for dressing. A file was prepared and
sent to the DPP. There was and we thought at the time, this is it. This is now going to progress, but it actually never did. So Sean Carroll has never been charged with the murder of Fiona Sinnott to date, but he remains the prime suspect in the case. And I think it's obvious why he is the prime suspect and no one else. Hello, Larry Murphy fans, and every time you hear about a murder, Brian, I think you've given your thoughts on that anyway. Yeah, that case. Yeah.
The the 6 initial cases there, I think it's very clear there that, you know, that blows the, well, shattering the vanishing triangle illusion, as the title of this broadcast is. You know, it blows that out of the water. There's 2 strong suspects in the Annie McCarrick case. Jojo Dullard case is more open, but there is one man local to Moon. That's not Larry Murphy again. That's the suspect there. The next, the other 3 there, Fiona Pender. It's clear the suspect is there. Her boyfriend, the Ciara Breen case, Liam Mullen, who's now deceased, and now we've the Fiona Sinnott case. So these cases are all pretty clear. It's like one, like I said before, in relation to one of them, somebody said somewhere the dogs in the street know what happened. It's like it's open secrets what happened here. Obviously the evidence is needed to convict somebody, but like I said, it's almost like an open secret with someone with most of these cases.
Let's move to our final case. Now, this is one where the Larry Murphy Brigade can maybe make a case, as was made to the TPP. But let's dive into that. Deirdre Jacob. Deirdre Jacob was born on October the 14th, 1979, to Michael and Bernadette Jacob, and she spent her childhood growing up in a bungalow just outside Newbridge, County Kildare, in an area called Rossbury. During the 1980s, it was a quiet place and had yet to see the sprawling housing developments that would soon come. Brought up in a Catholic family, her parents describe her as bookish, and in secondary school she sang for several years in the school choir and also helped out the church choir, and also helped out in a local Sunday school for younger children. She played guitar and piano and loved to write. When she completed school, Deirdre continued her passion for writing, playing the piano, and she quickly decided she wanted to teach kids. She left Ireland in 1997 and began studying to be a primary level teacher at St Mary's College in Twickenham, London, to qualify. By May 1998, her first year of study was completed and she returned back to her parents' home in Newbridge, Ireland. During her time in college, she began a romantic relationship that April with a classmate, Charlie. Deirdre wanted him to visit Ireland that summer, and she was eager to bring him over and meet her parents and show him the sights of Ireland in August. Her family were looking forward to that visit. Deirdre was also looking forward to seeing her old school friends on her summer trip back home, and her mother, Bernadette, had assisted her in getting a part-time job in the HSE, the Health Service Executive, where she worked. Her dad, Michael, worked as an official at Ciasca, an agri-advisory body locally. Deirdre had a young sister, Ciara, who was still at secondary school level. Always planning ahead, on July 28, Deirdre left her home and walked into Newbridge town to organise a bank draft to send to her flatmate in London for the accommodation she would return to when the study year started again, as summer gave way to autumn. I think that was in September she was planning to travel back. She also wanted to post some letters she had written the previous evening, July 27th, to send to friends. She was very close to her grandmother, who ran a sweet shop in Newbridge, and it was also an opportunity to spend time with her that day. Deirdre made the walking trip to Newbridge town, deposited money, and finally sorted the bank draft, and along with some letters she posted, she popped in twice to her grandmother's shop that afternoon, early in the afternoon. She then started a 25-minute walk back home around 2:35 to 3 p.m. There's reason to believe Deirdre almost got home. Witness accounts from locals, possibly as far as the entry to her parents' road, driveway and home. But after that, Deirdre Jacob vanished into thin air. This is the timeline and study of the disappearance as it unfolded. We're not going to get into it. That's from our early timeline. Again, all these timelines are in the description. Now, yeah, you've been waiting. Larry Murphy. He was one of the case suspects in this case. Of all the 6 Vanishing Triangle cases, Deirdre's case remains the most open to suspects. What sets it apart from the others is that it is one case where Gardaí did submit a file to the DPP, Department of Public Prosecutions, on Larry Murphy. This submission was dismissed on the grounds that it barely reached the criteria of circumstantial evidence. that Murphy may or may not have been in the area at the time of the disappearance, that he had confessed to a fellow criminal looking for a lenient sentence, that a business card from Murphy for carpentry work had been found in a drawer from Deirdre's grandmother, and that Murphy did fit something of a potential criminal profile in the case. Detectives had set out to rule in or rule out Murphy, and then 56-year-old Murphy, from their investigation. They tracked down a number of his former colleagues and other people who knew Murphy back in 1998 when he was a jobbing carpenter in Leinster. Most were living overseas, requiring Gardaí to travel abroad to interview them. Each was asked to identify the individual in the enhanced CCTV footage from Newbridge, but Gardaí received conflicting accounts. However, it is understood that at least one person identified the individual in the image as resembling Larry Murphy. The images of the person of interest and Gardaí attempts to identify him formed the central plank of evidence in the Deirdre Jacob murder file that Gardaí submitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions in 2019-2020. The file was submitted after her case was upgraded from a missing person to murder in 2018. But ultimately, by 2022, the Department of Public Prosecutions decided not to prosecute. Garda Síochána, a statement at that time, confirmed as part of this investigation a file was forwarded to the DPP and was recently returned with the direction of no prosecution. The family of Miss Jacob have been informed and are being continuously liaised with. So why did this prosecution of Larry Murphy fail, Brian?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was based on the conversation between that was lubricated with alcohol, any old conversation, and when he was inside with another inmate, and it was quite detailed on what he said he did. It was along the lines that he had he pretended to ask for directions and then attacked her and dragged her into the car, and into the front seat, and it was quite detailed that he kind of just got her in that way with asking for directions, and had toys in the seat of the car and so on to put her at ease. So again, there was nothing to suggest it was true. People can get as detailed as they want. Like if it's not true, there's no evidence there either, then you can't proceed with it. Like, so very hard to know, Mick.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. A very senior Garda detective, about a little over 5 years ago, I think it was one of the very I can't remember which case it was when I first started looking at doing a timeline and profile, and he told me, do you know what, it's the one difficult thing is the people who admit to information on a crime or having knowledge of a crime. The moment they start going into extensive detailed information is the moment you start doubting whether they're actually telling you the truth, because no one remembers that kind of detail and you wonder where they've got it from. And I just thought I'd say that. It just came to mind there.
Yeah, because even if Larry Murphy did tell him all this, like, this could just have been one of his modus operandis or something that he fantasized about or thought about or said, when I go out I'm going to try to, you don't know. And the other guy, like I said, there was a good bit of detail there, but again, nothing to back it up. So I guess why he was kicked out then, Mick, that leads into that, I suppose.
Yeah. Why did the prosecution of Larry Murphy fail? Well, because it was based on core intimate whispers within prison that never stood up to actual scrutiny. In other words, Gardaí had definitive lines of evidence, and what this person was telling them wasn't matching up. In other words, they believed this person is making up some of the details and it doesn't fit. And because Murphy fitted a convenient profile but without any real evidential proof, and because Poor and later enhanced CCTV footage presented to an associate of Murphy suggested it did maybe resemble Murphy, but they weren't certain. And because police unearthed some evidence that Larry Murphy offered some carpentry work by dropping a business card into Deirdre Jacobs' granny more than 5 years before her disappearance, but they could provide no actual evidence that Murphy was living or working anywhere near the area of Deirdre Jacobs' disappearance in July on the day in 1998. And at best, Murphy's links directly to the case of Deirdre Jacob were tenuous, based on a business card found in Mrs. O'Grady's shop and a former prison inmate of Murphy who thought a piece of CCTV might have resembled him after Murphy told him privately he was the killer. Of course, this has nothing to do with said prison inmate looking for a reduction in his sentence. That's how flimsy the circumstantial evidence was against Murphy in this case, and rightly the DPP threw out the potential evidence case presented because it contained no substantive evidence that would ever lead to a prosecution in a court of law. Now, I've spoken to a number of Gardaí involving serious investigations, most retired now, and they consider this whole episode embarrassing, meaning just fit Murphy up with this. He's a bad egg and have him off the streets of London, Brussels, Amsterdam and Wicklow, Kildare, wherever he goes when he comes back to Ireland, and we have the chance to nail him for something more. The submitted case file was so shockingly poor, the Gardaí may well has been fitting up RTE's children's show Bosco or Dustin, the turkey for the crime. It came at a time when An Garda Síochána were establishing their serious crime review unit and cold case teams, and several senior investigative Gardaí of long standing for decades were retiring and wanted to tie up unsolved cases and unfinished business to make retirement a little easier on their collective consciences. Brian?
Say as well, speaking about embarrassing episodes, just in connection with the CCTV, there was one documentary, you know, again, media misinformation, but one documentary was going strongly down this line of inquiry, if you could call it that, and they had the CCTV from the bank with the face greyed out and talking about that this could be Larry Murphy and so on, like, and it's just, you know, I don't know why that was even included. How are you going to even begin to convince your audience that way? Like, you know, it was, speaking of embarrassing episodes, but anyway.
Yeah, not to digress too much, you're reminding me as well of that moment. Do you remember the Ezra Iron case with the dog up Bray Hill and other? Now we think now that could be. Now we're fairly sure that's you know, that's your sister, you know, and it's like 100,000 people are watching this program and going, what the fuck are you lot at, you know, and you're supposed to be investigating this case. It's obviously not her, you know. That was one of those moments. Yeah.
But it was cringeworthy, as they say, but like, it was, the way he spoke to her was really
condescending, and like, you know, silly little girl, you know, and
I was kind of smiling to her, you know, and you know, but I mean, she's very, very strong lady,
Berner, yeah.
You know, I mean, she was her sister, you know. If she saw her in the distance, she'd tell from her body language. And I think one of the most embarrassing parts of that for that guy was the fact that he was saying the only way there was no way down off the hill, and that's she committed suicide, QED, like, and he didn't say that explicitly, but that was where he was going with it. And she said, well, actually, you can get down off the hill another way, like. So you had an English woman of Turkish extraction telling an Irish detective about the geography of the hill down
it bordered on comical, tragicomedy,
exactly.
Yeah,
you know, that's it.
On our Deirdre Jacob case, on Murphy, and concluding him as a suspect, has he killed someone? Very likely. Is he a profound serial killer the media like to portray him as? Hardly likely. One only has to look at his MO, his modus operandi, to see that if he were a serial killer, he would have been caught red-handed like he was many decades ago. I still remain convinced that whoever killed Deirdre knew her or knew of her, and that she was back home from the UK in recent days, and he or she was monitoring her movements as a local in the area. Brian, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, another very, very, very tragic case. I mean, you know, obviously very, very talented girl, like, and, you know, into music, writing, so on, and I found her calling with teaching. You know, it's you know, a very, very hard case. But yeah, Mick, I mean, it's kind of wide open, really. Like you say, it's the most wide open one there, I think, there in terms of suspects of what could have happened. And, you know, I'd say whoever did it, it wasn't their debut at trying something like that either, because to do something like that in broad daylight, and then you're kind of wondering if she knew them well and she didn't see them as a threat. Did she sit into the car with them, or was did they overpower in some way? So it's bizarre, like, and no other leads, like, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely, completely agree with you. Brian, just for viewers on screen, as we finish those 6 cases, I'm just bringing up, I think you've seen this, this from our database. Now, this is just limited information we pulled from our database. It's much more extensive than this, and it's the 6 cases that you've just seen, and you'll notice from I hope you can see this easier in the way I put it up. Trace and case crossover. You know, the 6 cases that were the primary Operation Trace cases: Annie, Jojo, Fiona, Ciara, Deirdre, and Fiona Sinnott. The areas they were from. Go on.
Just to call out there as well that curiously the Garda website has a page titled "The Murder of Fiona Pender," but they haven't formally upgraded her investigation to a murder either. So that's kind of curious. I don't know if they're going to do that soon or not, but they have a page that declares her disappearance as a murder. So I'm not sure what way that's going to go there either. Like, you know.
Yeah, so people can, if you want to pause and take a look at that, I think the clear point and the reason why I'm putting that up is, for me, the important columns in that is cause of death unknown, rape unknown, body found no, suspect multiple, yes, and the suspect names where we can name them, and the case status. Let's get back and just finish up on our timeline. Bear with me 1 second, Brian. I just need to switch over here and switch back there. Okay, so you've taken a look at that. Okay, right. So you've heard the 6 cases. Look, at the risk of labouring a point and repeating ourselves, and sometimes I feel, oh God, people are probably saying, will you ever shut up? You've made the point. I think we've comprehensively laid out why the illusion created by the media and its various forms have been completely shattered. It is exactly that, an illusion to flog countless news features, books, TV documentaries and drama crime shows. At least in our feature core 6 cases above, often cited from Operation Trace, there's absolutely no shred of evidence that these crimes and cases came about as a result of some fictitious and rampaging serial killer in Ireland over more than a decade. The Irish people, the Irish police know this. Well, the Irish people do as well. I would like to think now, after this episode, if they viewed it. The families of the missing and murdered know it. We know it, but the illusion is still continuously fed to us by media. The reality, most of the women above, and many more we will deal with in part 3, the forgotten cases, and Brian's going to be very much hosting that episode, hopefully next week. disappeared and were murdered by someone known to them and that they trusted at the time. I will share with you this communication to me last night. This is a close family relative of one of the above 6 missing women aware that we had this episode coming. Her words: there never was a vanishing triangle. 2 of these women were murdered by their significant others. One murdered by an older man she was seeing, one by someone in law enforcement, and the other by the son of a former IFA president. How do I know this? I am the family member of one of the missing pictured above here. It is egregious that their killers have never been brought to justice. And that's the general sentiment and frustration experienced by many of the families we deal with on Radio Espial, despite the tireless work they do to highlight their loved ones over many, many years. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great summation there from the relative, like, and that should be, people have to look at this whole vanishing triangle has become a commodity. It's, you know, it's an expression I never cared for. It's become a commodity. Larry Murphy's become a commodity. It's just, you know, all wrong, like, and it's a disservice to the families there. You got it there, straight out of the horse's mouth there. That's one of the relatives. They've enough to deal with. They don't need this on top of it, like, you know. Enough said there, Mickey.
Yeah, okay. Look, our lead into episode 53. Episode 52 here tonight. Episode 53, Brian is going to take you through next week. Don't worry, he's not going to get rid of me. I'm not leaving either. I will be here, but you're going to hear an awful lot more from Brian than me next week. It's entitled Missing and Murdered Again, The Forgotten Cases. What we're going to do in that is, there are other secondary cases often associated by the public and media with the so-called Vanishing Triangle. Now, in episode 53 next week, hopefully, Brian's going to take a closer look at these secondary cases. Some of them were looked at during the period of Operation Trace, discussed above in the episode, in relation to case similarities and any possible suspect connections. We will also have a follow-up episode on the crimes and profile of Larry Murphy, but we do not believe he plays any substantive part in the so-called Vanishing Triangle. The closest Ireland has come to having active serial killers are John Thaw and Jeffrey Evans during the 1970s, responsible for the murders of Elizabeth Plunkett and Mary Duffy, and possibly more women unknown to us in Ireland and the UK. And again, if you go, something rings a bell with you and you're going, oh, where do I find out about it? We've done it. We've covered it. Description. Have a look for that episode. It's a really interesting feature that we covered many months ago, and if you really want to know about a real, actual serial killers activating and going about their business, as it were, in Ireland, that's the case you want to go to. Forget your Larry Murphy nonsense. Brian, it'll be over to you for part 3, the forgotten cases. Have we got a serial killer out there? You don't have to answer that now.
You've heard our mantra, so I think
I think we pretty much cover that.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate again, folks, so episode 53, we come back with that, some of the forgotten cases, and just again to repeat ourselves as well. Just go into this stuff with your eyes open, you know, do your homework and consider the sources there as well. You know that you know, when you're reading or listening to anything to do with the information on these cases, be objective, do your case homework, and always question the source and their motivations.
Yeah, and look, I know Brian has complete free range in episode 53 as to which cases he wants to select to look at. He's kind of given me a tiny glimmer of the cases he wants to look at. I pretty much know that we're going to be talking probably about the Antoinette Smith case, the Patricia Doherty cases, but I think he might have 3 or 4 other cases we want to look at, and we'll probably be getting more into within those cases. Are there similarities? Are there things? Marie Kilmartin, we touched on that case before. We might touch upon that. That has been included in the wider sphere of the Vanishing Triangle. But look, for now, thanks to Brian for joining us for this episode. We'll let you know about the follow-up episode 53, the Forgotten Cases, coming next. We'll do that on the new community link. You'll see that on the YouTube. It's linked there. If you look up the top, again, it'll be in the description. I'll try and do a specific post on that after we broadcast this episode, and I'll put it in the community link on YouTube as well. But look, for now, as always, God bless. Take care of each other, and hope you all have a great weekend. We'll see you again, hopefully very soon next week. Take care.
All the best. Bye now.